He's originally from Toronto. In 2013, he was awarded the Rambler Medal by the Ocean Cruising Club. The award is given for the most challenging voyage made by a member of the club. He received it for his short-handed voyage through the Northwest Passage. He made a short YouTube video last year about the chilly fun of sailing a Grampian 26 from Pickering on New Year's Day. I presume one could look that up.
I'm going to show it.
Oh, you're going to show it, okay.
I may show it.
Richard has previously shared stories with us of his voyages to Brazil, Antarctica, Easter Island, Patagonia, and the Northwest Passage. Today, he will give an instructional presentation about how you can achieve your cruising dream. Please give our guest speaker a warm welcome.
All right, thank you, Diane. It's great to be back at Shellback's. And it's great to have a nice
Yes.
lunch. Those sausages were really good. So, I'm going to start by telling you a little more about my background. I started sailing in Toronto when I was about 13 years old. And at the time, Harbourfront was offering free sailing lessons for kids for these 25-foot converted lifeboats. And I don't have a picture of them, but this is they were just a little smaller version of this kind of boat. And dipping lug rig schooner, where you'd have a rope attached to this yard, the wooden piece of the spar. And every time you wanted to tack, you'd have to pull this down and take the sail over to the other side. And you did that with full sails. A really fun boat to sail on. Not a particularly good rig for reefing at sea, but a really easy, cheap way of putting a rig onto a sailboat. After that, I was in the Toronto Brigantine program as a watch officer on Pathfinder, and I owned a total of 4 cruising boats. One small fiberglass sloop, Grampian, and then 3 steel schooners. The biggest of which, 50-foot staysail schooner Issuma, I have sailed here. I bought it in France, and I made this trip, very indirect circumnavigation of the Americas in this boat. So all my boats were bought used, and they all need, as anyone who's bought a used boat knows, they needed a lot of repairs. So I got quite familiar with modifications, maintenance, and repairs. Today, my topic is actually, Paul was the one who suggested this to me a year ago. And it's not so much, before when I've come here, I've talked about places I've gone, adventures I've had. This presentation is about how to achieve your cruising dream. So, how to go about cruising the places and the way that you want to do, as opposed to necessarily going about it the way I want to do. Because I dream of sailing in the ice all the time. And most people actually do. So I encourage people to ask questions as we're going along. I'd like to answer as many as I can as we're going along. Well, this is one of the incentives to go cruising is places like this. This is a nice little place in Brazil, and what's considered the nicest cruising area of Brazil. It's in the Ilha Grande, or Big Island region of Brazil. They got beautiful, sunny, tropical weather all the time with light winds. It's a really nice area. And it seems like this. Most people like places like this. I like places like this. So there's a lot of ways you can go cruising. And probably the cheapest way you can go cruising is to go crew on someone else's boat. Friend Greg is going to be doing that across the Pacific shortly. This boat, I met this boat, this is about 100 miles away from Bermuda where I took this picture. I met up with this boat. They were coming back from the Newport Bermuda race, and hey, you picked up crew. If you want to go crew on a boat, there's lots of opportunities. It's easier now because you've got websites like findingcrew.net to go in and find opportunities crewing. And you can, it's good for people who don't have a lot of experience, and it's good for people who have experience but don't have a boat or don't have the desire to take their boat. It's, there's the boats that have, the better boats, the better, the more experienced captains, they get more of their choice of crew. They get to pick a better selection of crew. They may charge more for it. Some people charge, some people don't. The amounts they charge vary widely. But it's a good way to get out cruising if you don't have a boat or if you're short on experience. The trick is to get along with people, and that is easier said than done. It is, how many of you sailed like long, at least overnight, with a bunch of strangers or some strangers? Yeah. And did it work out well?
Some of it.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, it works out. The shorter the trip, the better it works out to live with strangers. The longer the trip, though, the more challenge the personalities provide. Because even if two people are not representing themselves, it's really a challenge to describe yourself as another person would see you, and for the other person to describe themselves as you will see them. And one person's definition of quiet is another person's definition of loud. The personality, the technical skills can be learned, but personalities are the challenge with getting on a boat as crew. And all I can say is describe yourself as best as you can. See if you can figure out what the other party is as best as you can. It's a great way to get out sailing all kinds of places without taking your own boat there. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say that I've done long distance sailing, but not with strangers, with friends. And I've been in situations where both the friend and yours truly discovered that the friend had fears that they didn't know they had before you sailed.
That's a good point. Even with friends, even with people you think you know, in your case, they discovered fears they didn't know they had. Yeah, things come up at sea, in the environment of the sea, and things like that happen. Did it work out eventually?
Well, yes, I guess I would say that it did. I had to be a very cruel captain with the friend to just try and forcefully, deal with the situation. And I have one friend who never sailed again as a result of this, situation that we're in. But it's tough to try and figure out what to do sometimes.
Where were you? Where were you?
Between here and Bermuda.
So between here and Bermuda, so that's like about a 1-week trip.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's tough to
Boy, did that.
evaluate people in a different situation. Tough does not mean not worth doing. Yeah, so that's one way. Chartering, of course, is another way. If you don't have a boat, or you don't want to take your boat down and take to the place you want to see, chartering is a great way to do that. And whether that's with a captain or without, the advantage of going with a captain, it's not just that you don't have to have as much knowledge if you hire a captain, that you don't have to do as much preparation. Like, if you're going to some place, there's all sorts of research you can do about places you might want to sail, so you know where's the interesting places that you're interested in visiting and places you'd like to go and all that. If you're busy working and don't have any time for that, you're better off getting a charter boat, get one with a captain. Then you've got someone with local knowledge who can take you to all the places that you don't have the time to do the research on yourself. So chartering is a perfectly good way of going off cruising. If you don't have without the requirement to have your own boat, you have no responsibilities to the vessel after you leave it. Yeah, the same as going on your own boat, but there's a lot to be said for it. Probably a lot of good charter. I've chartered. And then going on your own boat. Okay? There's a couple ways you can do this. I mean, you can buy a boat in the place you want to cruise, or you can bring your boat from where you live to where you want to cruise. And if you buy a boat in the place you want to cruise, there's actually a lot of, in downwind tropical places, there's a lot of boats for sale. There's a lot of people who make their first trip to a downwind island and realize it isn't for them for one reason or another. So there's lots of boats for sale, because to get anywhere else, to get back to Europe or North America or wherever, it's an upwind trip, it's harder, and typically there's been some disagreements aboard the boat, and the captain or owner is looking at having no crew or finding crew, and it's not worked out, and there's a lot of boats for sale. You can buy a boat for sale someplace, some tropical paradise kind of place. What happens very quickly when you do that is you learn about doing boat maintenance in exotic places. It happens to you quicker than it will happen if you sail your own boat there, because you're immediately, boats always need work, and you're going to be forced to find out how to do the work there. Whether it's a challenge in places you're not used to. It's a challenge to either first to hire out work or to buy stuff. It depends on the culture. I did a couple of refits in South America, and it was an education for me, because in the North American, North European culture, you can if you want someone to do something for you, you just pay them, and they'll do it. You want a carpenter to modify some stuff, then you give them some money and say, I want you to do this, this, and this, and he'll do this, this, and this, and it's fairly straightforward. In South America, generally speaking, you don't do that, because you have to first build a relationship. It's not done. It's like, I want a beer, and I walk over, someone say, here, $10, give me a beer, please. And you say, well, no, like, who are you? I'm not your servant. Go get it yourself. And if you just think you can hire someone, you can't. You have to actually build a relationship with them first. So learning that will take time. Some places you can't buy parts. Some places they really like to make parts. Like in Brazil, it's very difficult to ship in parts, but it's very easy to find someone to build you what you need. You go to the chandlery, you want to buy some anchor chain. It's not galvanized, because you're supposed to hire someone to go and install the chain for you, and they galvanize it while they do that. It's a different models. But yeah, buying a boat in a place you want to sail, it quickly gets you familiar with how to get stuff done in that place. And the other way of doing it is, of course, to take your own boat, whether the boat you now own, or whether you buy a new or used boat for the purpose. This is kind of what most people dream of doing. It's the most expensive, the most time consuming, and probably the most satisfying way of going cruising. If you buy a new boat, it won't break down nearly as much. If you buy a used boat, it'll do a lot of that, especially if you go offshore with it, because once you go offshore, you're putting a huge amount of wear and tear on the boat that you just don't ever do when if you spend 10 summers sailing around the Great Lakes. That doesn't really compare to spending a couple weeks, 24 hours a day at sea. The wear and tear you get, the chafe especially, you just don't get that when you're just doing a couple weeks vacation a year and sailing at night and sailing on the weekends. Just way more wear and tear. So a lot of maintenance that has to be done. What's really key, of course, if you're going to take your own boat, is the condition of the boat. It's got to be, the hull's got to be strong, the rig's got to be good, It's gotta be watertight. And the engine, you want a good engine, like in good condition. And you've gotta think about all the wear you're gonna put on that rig and the sails, and probably you need new sails. It takes a lot of money to put a boat together to go offshore. If you're not going that far, it's a lot less expensive. And then if it's your own boat, you need the skills. This is the advantage of the charter boat where you hire the captain or you go as crew on someone else's boat. They've got to have all the skills, because you need to be able to at least patch your sails, put chafe patches on your sails, deal with chafe problems. On an engine, at a minimum, you need to be able to change the fuel filters, take the water out of the fuel, check all the levels, check the belts, and bleed the engine unless it's a new diesel that doesn't require bleeding. And you have to actually, you have to really and truly know how to do that if you're gonna take your own boat, because you're gonna get water in your fuel. It just happens. It doesn't seem to happen around here. All the places you can buy fuel seems to be selling fuel that has no water in it, which is great. But all kinds of places elsewhere in the world, you end up with water in your fuel. And it totally stops your engine when it happens, if you don't stop it before that. And you gotta think about route planning. Anyone planning any voyages in the North Atlantic? No. Okay, well, I will just say there's a lot to route planning. Thinking on trying to find good weather. This is a pilot chart, which if you're going offshore, you need to know how to use these. They tell you historical averages of wind and weather for each ocean of the year per month. And you have to think about health. It's really healthy to be at sea, generally speaking, because it's fresh air and exercise, but you're quite at risk of getting cuts and breaking something. Get your hand jammed in a block or a winch or something lets go. You can break things. You can get cuts easily, and there's all you got is your first aid kit, and then however many days it takes you to get to some better kind of medical assistance. Most of the places I've gone to, medical care is less expensive than Canada. US being a notable exception where you should never get sick in the United States. Health insurance is not that easy to, health insurance, you can get it from PADI, like health insurance when you don't live in Canada. And in Canada, if you live in Canada, you're only allowed to go for 5 to 7 months before they won't let you keep your health insurance. So you kind of want to get some insurance beyond that. And you may have to think about medical evacuation insurance. But I needed to get that for all my crew, all my crew needed to get that when we went to Antarctica. It was a requirement of getting a permit to go there. And money, of course, those of you who've had big boats and fitted them out know that, well, you can spend a lot of those piles. What's nice about cruising now is that bank cards and ATM machines work everywhere. So pretty much everywhere in the world, you can get local currency just with your bank card. If your bank card expires while you're off cruising, that entirely depends on what bank you have and what relationship you have with them on how easy it is to get another card. I've done that, and mine expired on Easter Island. I was fortunate I had credit cards. I had no Chilean pesos, and I needed them to buy provisions and that in Easter Island, and I was fortunate I could get cash advances on my credit cards. And it's expensive to do, but at least he got me some pesos, which I needed. The ice cream is good. So there's a lot of there's a lot of things about cruising that don't. it's a lot harder than you might think in terms of things that break down and things that don't work so well. And until you've done it for a while, your odds of actually getting to where you intended on going, when you intended on getting there, are actually quite low. But the more you do it, the better you get at that. And despite all the difficulties, I'm just mentioning the difficulties, but there's also the beautiful parts of it, and the really rewarding parts of it. It's a really nice thing to get out there cruising. Right? This gives you, this picture shows you a bit of that, and whoops. This one shows you a bit more. That's from South Georgia, a really beautiful place. So I would encourage you, if you're at all interested in cruising, to go out and do it one way or another. Ron?
How much do you improvise your route?
How much do you improvise your route?
Yeah, I mean, you plan where you're going, but how often does that actually follow through?
You plan where you're going, but how often does that actually follow through? That depends. Part of that comes from experience, knowing how fast you actually travel, and reserving enough time for the unexpected things that happen. Because at first you'll be tended to, like if you, for instance, have Polar's for your boat, and you know that your boat goes X miles in 24 hours, and you may have even reached those. But now that you've loaded it down with all the stuff that you accumulate, all the provisions you have, it doesn't go that X miles in 24 hours anymore, so everything takes longer. And you're delayed because the wind's not from the direction you want it to come from. If you can wait a few days and get a favorable wind instead of beating into a headwind, everyone's gonna wait a few days. So everything takes a lot longer, and then things break down and take a lot longer to fix. So your record of getting where you're intending on going, roughly when you're intending on being there, gets better over time. At first, my record was really, it was surprising how rarely I got to where I said I was going, when I said I was going to go there. At first, it just isn't that easy. It seems a lot easier than it actually is. But so you have to be realistic about that, and that comes from experience. If you're picking up crew, you really have to be realistic about that, because you've got to actually, your schedule is basically determined by the wind and by other things like maintenance, or I saw this cool little place, I just decided I have to stop here, and little additions to the schedule like that. That's what's driving your schedule, and then anyone whose crew is driving a schedule based on a calendar and booking an airplane ticket a few weeks in advance to get the lower price. So it takes a lot to meet those calendar deadlines. It takes a lot of planning to get that right, and it restricts how far you can go. You have to be conservative about your estimates of how far you can go, even if it seems, yeah, I could do that in a week, and now you're giving yourself 2.5 weeks. That might actually be the right thing, 2.5 to 3 weeks to do what you could do in a week. And often you're gonna get there early and wait, because otherwise you would get there late and they're waiting. So, if that.
Do you have second aid? When we traveled, did that, we took second aid course, and we had all the equipment, including morphine and all that, including an intravenous setup, which they said don't ever use it. But
second aid, I'm not familiar with second aid. I've only had first aid training, and I've had wilderness first aid training. And
you did it in Britain.
They do that in Britain, second aid. That sounds like a great thing, because the first aid is normally oriented towards, you're not that far in time away from a hospital or from medical assistance, and so you just need a limited amount of patching someone up. But at sea, you can be weeks away from any better medical assistance. Even though, yeah, with communications you can get some remote advice, but that advice it may not be what you need. You may need some actual medicines, like painkillers. If you ever really need painkillers, you'll be really happy you have painkillers on the boat. There's no substitute for the opioid painkillers. I know they're hard to get, but if you ever really need them, you really need them.
And they trained us, how to deal with, your friend who's a patient. Like you approach him as if you were a doctor and start asking him the routine questions that he's used to being asked, and then they calm down and you can basically be the doctor.
Yeah, that's right. You have to, you end up taking on a big medical role that you may or may not have much training in. And it would be great if everyone had a doctor on their crew.
It made us feel more
reality is-
comfortable with what we were doing.
So you got this great second aid training and that made you feel more comfortable. Yeah, that sounds like a wonderful thing.
How many crew do you often travel with?
How many crew do I often travel with? On my 50-foot boat, my ideal number of crew is 2 or 3, plus me. And and I usually do 1-person watches. So that allows, if you have that allows 3 watchstanders, and then 1 person can be primary person for maintenance and cooking. And if you have 3 watchstanders, you get lots of sleep, and that's a really nice thing. Sometimes I travel with twice that number of people, but ideal in terms of there's lots of space for everyone. I'm talking for ocean passages, for long trips, months at a time. Yeah, that's what
We
I do.
did a trip in the Northern Springs in Greece once, and there was a planned trip about getting to certain islands on certain days. And then we ran into those, I can't remember the name, those heavy, heavy winds. And we had to go into a cove, and they rafted all the boats together. It was fascinating. And the Commodore was from New Zealand, and he took all the anchors and embedded them in the sand. The boats were rafted, I think there were 6 or 8 boats. They were all rafted into the sand, the anchors were. And we had to stay there for 3 days because they were over 50-knot winds. And 50-60-knot winds. You had to hold on to the lines when you took the dinghy into shore because it was too dangerous. The motor even on the dinghy you couldn't go in. It was that strong. So your plans of being in certain places on certain days somehow just doesn't work out.
Yeah, that's right. I didn't even mention storms. You're absolutely right. Yeah, storms will delay you a lot, and for storms you've got to have the other thing. You really got to have a good anchoring system. In your example, you mentioned all the anchors, so they had several. And you probably need that.
It was
You
fascinating.
need at least a spare in case you lose yours.
We have some members here who've sailed around the world, and I've read their book, and it was always interesting to me with the amount of damage that they suffered, and in every single case, the damage was caused by some other boat whose anchor gave way, not by anything that they did.
Yeah. If you're anchored in a harbor with other boats, yeah, your safety depends on their anchors as well as yours. Yeah, it's
Usually a steel boat crashing into you.
usually it's a steel boat crashing into you. I usually have steel boats, so it's usually other boats that crash into me, and they come out second best.
Richard, can I ask you a quick question about
Yeah. go ahead.
anchors? Rockna and Vulcan are anchors of choice these days. Any comments about
Any
that?
comments on anchors?
Yeah,
Any comments on religion?
yeah.
So you asked specifically between Rockna and Vulcan. I don't know. The new generation anchors are better than the older ones. They've made a lot of improvements in anchors lately. I find that no anchor holds under all circumstances. I got a spade. I like it a lot. I considered a Rockna, but the roll bar on the Rockna didn't work for me. I think what's really important is to have a big anchor and a big next generation anchor. So Rockna, spade, Vulcan. There's a few more of them, and I'm not familiar with all of them. Really, I'm just familiar with the spade now because I've been using it for 5 or 6 years. And it was a big improvement over the CQR. And it was a big improvement over a Brazilian anchor, which was also a next generation anchor, but it was a little small for my boat. And I think they're out of business now. I would say it's most important with anchor to be big. And one of the newer generation ones is, I would prefer a newer generation ones, and I really would want at least one spare anchor. Because if you ever snag it on something and you're in a really deep place where you can't dive on it to clear it, and you might lose your anchor. And then if you don't have a spare, now you're gonna have to go sail someplace where you can tie up. You're gonna change your plans.
So that means you need to have like spare rod and chain and the whole bit too.
That means you need to have some way of doing spare rod and chain, yeah. And if you're anchoring for a hurricane or something, some really big storm, you may be thinking, you probably are thinking about having some protection if the wind comes from a different direction. Like if you have a frontal passage and it's a really strong system, you may well want an anchor that's gonna hold you from another direction, so that would be another reason to have 2 anchors. But yeah, I think you need a spare anchor. I have multiple anchors. Well, you also need an anchor to row out. If you run aground, you need an anchor that's small enough that you can get in your dinghy, that you can row out and you can pull your boat off the ground with an anchor. So some of this comes down to how much anchors you have room to store. And I do think you need a spare anchor and something that you can take out of the dinghy, some kind of anchor that you can pull the boat off when you're running aground.
Richard, did you have any formal training, or is it all learned as you go?
Did I have any formal training, or is it all learned as I go? I took, at Toronto Brigantine, they have formal training. I think it was called White Sail from CYA, decades ago. I took training to get my operator of uninspected passenger vessels in the United States, which is called a 6-pack. And I took training to get, David knows because he took the Thames training. There's something in Canada that's, the name
VSO, small vessel operator. Permit.
Small vessel operator, yes. So I have, but most of what I learned was something that was stuff that was informally learned or read about in books. Learned from other people on other boats and sometimes on my boat. Learned a lot in boat yards.
And you're fearless.
No, I'm not fearless. No, if you're fearless, you don't understand the risk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough, fair
You're
enough.
careless.
If you're fearless, you can be careless. You're likely to be careless. There's things about it. I mean, it's to go offshore is fundamentally not safe. It's fundamentally, there's a lot of elements of risk in it, and you have to think about what those elements of risk are, what the actual risks are, and think about what you're going to do if a particular situation comes up. I'm always thinking, I'm sailing along the coast, I am always thinking about what if the wind shifts, am I going on the rocks? Are there rocks nearby? Under what wind shift condition would I be on the rocks? What if fog suddenly comes up? Do I know what boats are around me? And can I keep navigating? Do I have, like if I'm on my own boat, I've got plotters, a boat always know your position on. But if you're on someone else's boat and you don't actually, you may not be keeping as close watching your position. Think about how close a watch you need to be keeping on your position. Think about what you're going to do if there's fog. If the wind dies, where are you going for the night if you're going to stop for the night? Is it safe to keep going at night in the place you're in, or do you have to stop for the night because you're dead tired and you've got no crew, you can leave to run the boat at night? I'm always thinking about possible things that could go wrong, and what I'm going to do if that happens. And it's not really worrying, but if you've got a plan for something that happens, then you know what to do. You're not wasting time thinking about it or panicking or suddenly having a discussion with where no one has thought of it before, you can immediately go and do what it is you need to do in that situation. So to get around that, so you're not fearless, but you think about the dangers and think about what you're going to do if something goes wrong, what specifically you're going to do. If you always got a plan for that, then you have a much better understanding what the actual risks you're involved in are. And you've got a fair amount of assurance. You have an understanding of how to avoid them and make it safe.
To add to that question, have you sailed in waters where pirates are concerned?
Have I sailed in waters where pirates are a concern? I haven't. I've avoided waters where pirates were a concern. I was by myself in Brazil, off the coast of Brazil. My boat motors at 5 knots. It sails faster, but it's got a small engine, so it only motors at 5 knots. It's a flat, calm day, no wind at all. So I was just motoring, and I saw this fishing boat, and he was coming towards me, so I avoided him. I didn't know if he was fishing or not, so I avoided him. He altered course, I avoided him again. He altered course, I avoided him again, and I got the impression, okay, well, this guy, I don't think he's fishing, I think he wants to come over and talk. So he comes over, and he holds up, one of his crew holds up a lobster and a crab, and he said they wanted to trade for some whiskey. And I said, I don't have any whiskey, but I got some cachaça. It's a Brazilian alcohol. So I ran down below to get the bottle of cachaça. And as I ran down below, it occurs to me, okay, so I just showed this guy that I'm by myself on a boat, that his boat is definitely faster than mine. I don't have any wind, I can't sail. And I don't have any weapons. And this was actually a really dumb idea. But anyway, I came up with the alcohol and wrapped it up, threw it over to his boat. They threw the crab and lobster over it. And really, it was just, they wanted some alcohol, and they had some crab and lobster to trade for it, and that was really and truly all it was. I thought about it. But no, I've never actually encountered any pirates. Jim?
Would you care to say some of your dangerous situations and what you could have done to avoid them?
Say it again.
Could you say a couple of your dangerous situations and what you could have done to avoid them?
Could I say a couple of dangerous situations and what I could have done to avoid them? Storms at sea, from leaving at a different time, but storms are kind of, if you're on a short voyage, it's pretty easy to avoid storms, or generally easy, because you've got forecasts that are accurate. But if you're on a long voyage, the forecasts aren't, you go beyond 4 days and forecasts aren't that accurate. I may have to think about a better answer to that. Off the top of my head, nothing is coming to mind.
Well, there was one you told off Visaya, and you were in your dinghy or something, and you're separated.
Oh yeah. Yes. I was, and your specific question was things I've thought about, things I've done that were dangerous that I realized later, if I thought about it, if I'd done differently, wouldn't have been dangerous. That was the question? Yeah. So I was anchored in an island in Antarctica. We were preparing for a 50-knot storm, and we had one anchor out. I wanted to get a line to shore to tie to the rocks, so we had that holding us in case the anchor dragged, because it had a steep slope. I wasn't convinced the anchor would hold. And I had 100 meters of rope and wire in the dinghy with me, and I was rowing to some rocks, looking, and I'm going up and down a meter in the swell, and I'm looking for some way I can get that wire end on the rope around the rocks and then lead this rope, 100 meters of rope back to the boat, and then we can be tied to the rocks that way. And I was looking around for this, looking around for what rock I could get around and get everything together. I lost an oar, and the wind is blowing me out to sea. I don't have a spare oar. I've got no. There's no room in the dinghy for a spare oar. I tried sculling the boat. I can't scull the boat with the oar that I have. I tried dog paddling for it. Nothing works. And the wind just keeps blowing me out to sea. I stand up paddle and I manage to get close to my anchored boat. My entire crew's on deck, seeing what's going on. I'm hoping that I was trying to get upwind of it, and the wind blowing me down. I couldn't. And I blew by the boat, and I was like 3 or 4 meters away. I wasn't far away from the boat, but I blew right by. They're trying to throw lines to me, and yeah, that didn't work. 2 people threw opposite ends of the same line, and then one other line got thrown. It wasn't long. It was just. And I said you should plan through all the possible things. Well, okay. Here's an example of what you're asking for. Here, I didn't plan through all the possible scenarios of making sure that there was always a line that was coiled and ready to go to be thrown. And that's easier said than done, because it's also got to be secured well enough once the waves start coming across the deck. And coils don't, the type of coil you can throw easily doesn't survive being a big wave coming over it. Anyway. Yeah, I ended up blowing out to sea. My crew had trouble getting the anchor up. I had nothing. I'm in a rising storm in Antarctica, and nothing but sea and ice for 18 miles before a rocky shore. And I'm in a dinghy with no oar. Mm-hmm. And that was an example of where, I didn't have an anchor, though honestly I don't know that I could have had an anchor in that boat, because with 100 meters of rope, you're trying to pay out the rope to row back to the boat, and then you've got another rope to catch up with it. Same with a spare oar. I really needed a better way of tying those oars in. If I'd thought that through, instead of just thinking, oh yeah, well I'll see an oar slipping out and I'll grab it before it slips all the way out, which worked up until then. So yeah, that's an example of something that a dangerous situation I got in by not well enough preparing for it. Those are the kinds of things that you learn, and hopefully you survive the lesson when you don't manage to actually think the possible scenarios through fully.
Now, if you had it to do over again, would you consider having a huge coil of rope on a drum on the back of the boat, like Skip Novak does, to take it? See, so that you take the line ashore and it's still attached to the boat?
Would I consider having a shorelines on a rope drum on the boat, so I could take it from that? I actually do have shorelines on rope drums on the boat. The thing is, when you're rowing, if you're rowing upwind, towing a lot of rope, and we're talking about 3/4 inch rope, that's an awful lot of friction. It's really hard when you're rowing. If you got a motor on your dinghy, you can do that, but rowing by hand, it's really hard to row upwind towing rope. So that's why I had the rope with me in the dinghy, so I could attach it to shore and then row downwind to the boat. So to answer your question, the line on deck, the reel of line on deck, I actually took it off the reel and put it in the dinghy with me.
So if you had had your oars secured, your plan would have worked.
If I had had my oars secured, my plan would have worked. Yes, though I will also say that you're rowing around rocks going up and down a meter in the swell with all these seals in the water. And your objective is to row around a rock and then shackle the wire, I got 10 meters of wire, back onto the wire of the rope, and then go back to the boat. That whole thing has elements of risk associated with it as you're rowing around these rocks, in case you accidentally end up on a rock and then fall out of the dinghy.
How long did it take for them to come and get you? They obviously got the motor going on the sailboat and came and got you, right?
How long did it take? I think it took an hour.
Until they finally got you.
Yeah.
How far out
had
were
trouble
you by the
raising the
time they
anchor.
got you?
How far out was I? I was a couple miles out.
Oh, my God.
And I didn't have a radio with me. I was only rowing 30 meters away. I didn't think I needed a radio. But I was really concerned they wouldn't be able to see me, so I had a red vest on, which I took off my clothes, took off the vest, and then put that on top of my one oar so that because my dinghy is white, the ice is white, the white caps are white. So I was just trying to stand out from the white.
Hey Richard, what's your opinion on location devices for personnel on your boat? Like, you know, AIS, personal location beacons. I mean, obviously if you're a long way offshore, a personal location beacon's worthless, but what about AIS transponders and the life vests?
So EPIRBs and AIS transponders on life vests. My opinion on that. The technology is changing quickly.
Yeah.
I've looked at them. I think you're now relying on a piece of electronics to save you if you fall off, which requires that you be wearing that. And I think the dangerous time for falling off is when something goes wrong in the middle of the night, and you run up on deck and you don't clip in because you're in a real hurry, and maybe you didn't wear your safety harness to bed, because it does get uncomfortable to sleep in a safety harness, and sometimes I sleep in them and sometimes I don't. And I think you have to think about how often are you going to be wearing that transmitter, the emergency transmitter, versus, but not your harness. So how often will you be on deck not tethered in, but wearing that transmitter? And that's an individual question. I don't have those right now. I may get them, but I really think the answer is high lifelines. Like I got a rail on my boat, not even lifelines, just a stainless steel tubing, and it's like 9.5. It's like 3 feet high. It comes up to here on me, and it's hard to fall off my boat. It's not impossible, but I've tried to make it as hard as possible to fall off, because I think anything else you do, I mean, just getting back on a boat at sea, there's no guarantee you're going to get back aboard in the waves, and especially if you don't have many people on board. If you got a full crew of full racing crew, or you're used to the people you go out day sailing with, put 5-6 people on the boat, everyone knows how to sail, or people you go racing with. They can probably retrieve you and get you out of the water. But if you're thinking about there's only one other person on the boat, their abilities to get back to you and then get you out of the water, I mean, given how much you weigh once your clothes get wet, rigging stuff to hoist you aboard and all that, there's no guarantee you're getting back aboard. So anything you do about safety once you've reached the water is nowhere near as good as preventing you from ever getting to the water. That's my opinion on personal transmitting devices.
Yeah, I'm just thinking, like, you're by yourself at night on a watch, you're in the cockpit, something happens, somehow you fall off the back of the boat, and no one else wakes up. They've got no way. If you've got a life vest with a transponder, at least they can find roughly where you are if they turn around when they come on watch in the morning.
Where your body is.
If you fall off on a solo watch and you fall off the boat and no one knows until they wake up naturally, then you're highly unlikely to survive that. If you fall off and you're wearing a transmitter, yes, that scenario, and it sets off an alarm and all this stuff works, and everyone understands what that alarm is and how to get the boat back to you, and they get the boat back to you in time before you drown. Yes, in that scenario, it would work. It would save your life. Or freeze to death. I mean, there's the hypothermia, the cold water, the cold shock syndrome. This all that stuff that more of an issue in cold water than warm water. Yes, there are certainly scenarios where those would save your life. I still think it's a far less effective than not falling off in the first place.
Yeah.
Making the boat such that it's difficult to fall off. Whatever now maybe it's hard on a particular boat to make it difficult to fall off. I mean, it may not be a good way to secure you in the cockpit. It may be stuff in the way making it difficult to have high lifelines, or better yet, a life rail. That does depend on the individual boat. And there's something to be said if you're crewing on boats, so if you brought your own with you, that's something. But then what's it send the signal to? I think it needs some kind of coordination with the yacht, like some electronics on the boat that it has to be in, somehow there's two parts to that. There's the receiving equipment as well as the transmitter. So I don't have a great answer. My
I hear you.
impression is that it's better not to fall in the water, and to make it hard to make it hard for people to fall in the water is far and away my preference over handling it after it happens.
I don't know if everyone here is familiar with the Sea Arch. It's a new device that just came on the market this summer. I have two of them because I know if I go overboard, there's no way my wife is going to be able to retrieve me. This device is a fanny pack, so it's not even as big as this fanny pack that I have on with my money in it. And you have to, it's CO2 activated, you have to pull it. What explodes out of it is a 5-foot arch that is made of neon yellow ballistic nylon, about 3 inches in diameter. So you've got a 5-foot arch with a flat bottom. You can lay it on the water, and you can lay in it, or you can sit in it. If you sit on the flat part of it, you've got the arch that's up 5 feet. You can lift 550 pounds in it. If you have a flashlight, you put the flashlight against it, and the whole thing lights up neon yellow at night. And so we introduced it at the club here this summer, because we had the cruising sailors have a weekend where they do a man overboard drill, and so they have 3 or 4 of the cruising sailors volunteer to use their boats, and they go in the harbor. And professional divers go off, and it's very illuminating to members to find out just how difficult it is to get anybody back on board. And I've been overboard, so I know what kind of a situation it can be. Even when I had a tether on and I was tied to the boat, But so if you haven't seen these, I highly recommend you look on the internet. It's called Sea Arch.
And
That's
the pirates-
interesting.
Sea Arch, okay, so
And then the pirates can find you with your money belt on, your other money. It's full of money.
It's fine in Lake Ontario, but it's no bloody good view of the ocean when you're dead in 4 or 5 minutes.
Well, usually you'd live longer than 4 or 5. If you fall into cold water, you've got the 1-10-1 rule. You've got 1 minute to control your breathing, and because as soon as you hit cold water, you have you gasp for breath. That's your first reaction is to gasp for breath, and it's an instinctive response. And if you gasp for breath underwater, you of course drown. So if you manage to prevent yourself from breathing in when you hit the water, then you're far more likely to survive it if you can. The 1-10-1 rule is you got 1 minute to control your breathing, 10 minutes of meaningful movement to self-rescue, and then an hour before the hypothermia kills you, as a very general cold water thing. So when you think about the time it takes to turn a boat around after they realize that you fall in the water, and then turn the boat around and then get up to you, and then in waves, and your heads are really small, hard to see in the water. Your sea arch, which would certainly help with that. but get the boat up to you and then sort out how to get you aboard. You're losing your coordination after 10 minutes, so you're less and less likely to be able to assist much in your rescue. So you're relying on the crew on the boat and how many there are and how experienced they are and how physically strong they are. And it's really bad news if you fall in the water offshore.
Sherry was just asking me, don't I have a ladder on the back of my boat? Most people don't realize that it's virtually impossible to get on a ladder at the back of a boat in heavy sea.
Yeah, I
Yep.